Now we're going to learn how to do slab building. We're going to make a pot that's like this, but just a little bit smaller, okay? This is for when you're more advanced, you know what you're doing, then you can make it bigger like this. Right now we're going to make a smaller one that's about the size of this bottle, maybe a little shorter, a little bit wider, okay? Notice the top of this can be curved, the sides can be curved, or you can just make a really blocky, simple one for your first try. It's okay. We just want to learn the technique. So you can get about this much clay, a lot more than when you're wheel throwing. Make sure whenever you're wheel throwing or slab building that the clay is soft. You don't want really hard clay. It's really annoying if you have hard clay. How many times are we going to wedge it?
30 times.
30 times. Good job. Anybody counting for me? That's okay, I got it. When you get really good, it doesn't take very long to do 30 wedges. It only takes 30 seconds. That's probably 40 or 50. Then again, I'm going to roll it up into a log. Okay? Tap both sides, and then smack it down on the side until about there. Now, you should have a pattern prepared. It's going to be about 6 by 6 inches, give or take. This one I think is more like 7 or 8 inches by 5 inches. I'm going to cut the top down a little bit because I don't want it that big. So I'm going to have some pre-cut cards like this, but if you want to cut your own, that's fine. If you want like a taller one or a wider one, you can cut your own. I'm going to fold that in half, and I'm going to draw the outline of one side of the pot, like as if I divided it down the middle. I'm just drawing the outside, the bottom, and the top. The bottom is already flat, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And then I think I want this pot to just be pretty simple. And then I want a cool top in the middle. So, I'm going to cut these pieces out. Notice how my design goes all the way to the edge. Don't draw your design inside the edge, it's going to be really thin. It'll be harder for your fingers to go inside. We're going to cut it even. When I folded it, it was a little uneven, so I'm going to square that up. Make sure both pieces are the same. Both sides, I mean, are the same. I also drew that a little narrow, so I'm going to make it a little wider. Okay, now I'm going to unfold and see how I like it. Does that look cool? That'll make a pretty cool vase. This is more advanced. If you make all these cuts in it and make it really interesting looking, it'll take a little bit more work, just like a teeny tiny bit more work, but it'll make it more interesting. But if you want to make it just a flat side at an angle, just put a little bit of feature on it, that's okay too. You can keep it simple. So now I've got to make my pattern this size. Not my pattern, my clay. I'm going to stretch it. I'm just going to stretch it in one direction. I hit the clay back and forth sideways like this, not straight down, until it's about the same size as my pattern. Now I'm going to square the ends. Okay, I need to stretch it some more. That's good. And now I want this to be about as thick as a raw piece of steak. If it's as thin as a pancake, then it's too thin. Come over here. You're going to tap down the leading edge. It's going to go under the rollers. Make sure your pattern still fits on there. We're going to roll it this way. It only needs to fit top and bottom. We're going to roll it this way and make big enough for a couple slabs. Can you hold that for me? We're gonna lay it on the side so that other people can lay theirs here and we can roll two at the same time. We're gonna pull this back until it's just a few inches from the end. See how my fingers can fit right there still? That's important because it's gonna, when we stretch it, it's also gonna kind of mush into that space. And now before we roll it, we gotta check the thickness. I personally want it to come to the end of my fingernail, right there, my fingernail bed. For you, it might be going all the way to the knuckle, the first knuckle, or going to the third knuckle, or second knuckle, I mean. So you just gotta figure out how thick to make it. We don't want it thicker than half an inch, and we don't want it thinner than a quarter inch. In between a quarter inch, they have about a centimeter thick, about a centimeter thick. See how fast I'm spinning that? Because there's other people waiting. Perfect. Okay, now I'm gonna get a board. It needs to be a board that's big enough for that big slab. I set it right on top, and then I flip the canvas. And now I've got my slab on the board without putting any fingerprints on it. Come over here. Pause. You should be able to do all these steps in one day to get it all the way to this stage and cut out your pieces in one day. I've done 2 demonstrations today and I've had time to do most of them. The reason we use poster paper for our pattern is because it's stiff. And when we start cutting it out, it's gonna hold its shape for multiple cuts. Make sure when you're cutting this out, you're holding the knife straight up and down. A lot of people, when they start out, they cut it at an angle, like they tilt their hand like they do when they're writing, but you have to hold it straight up and down. Overcuts are okay. It doesn't matter if you cut it just a little bit long. And there we go. We take our scraps, we put them in a pile here. Do we squish them up? No. When we put them back in the bag, we're gonna leave them separate pieces. We're just gonna spray them really good and put them in the bag like that. Then that water will be able to soften them up, and the next person comes will be able to wedge it and it'll be just like new again. Okay? I'm not squishing it up. I might have it in a little bit of a ball, but it's loose so that the water can soften it. That's gonna go in the soft clay bag. Okay? These brand new scraps. Do not leave them on your board and cover them with plastic because they'll harden, and then we have to wait to recycle them. So we're gonna cut another one. I'm gonna line this up with the other lines that I have so I don't have to cut as many lines. Pause. So now I've cut out 2 sides. This is not, the rest of it is not big enough for another. So I'm gonna have to re-wedge this clay, maybe add a little bit more so I can get at least 3 sides. You can make your vessel 3-sided, 4-sided, or 5-sided. But the more sides you put on, the more work it's gonna be. So it's up to you, whatever you want. You have your freedom. After we get our sides cut out, we have to bevel the edges. You can bevel it with a knife like this, holding it at a 45-degree angle. Or at a 60-degree angle if it's 3-sided. Or you can use a beveling tool, which I have in my office. If you're not very good at holding it at an angle and cutting it nice and evenly, you can use the beveling tool. Okay? You'll do that just on the sides, not on the top and bottom. Then you'll get some newspaper. Who had that newspaper that we found on the floor? Okay, we want 4 layers in between each piece of slab when we store it away at nighttime. So, I'm gonna carefully pick that up, try and leave the least amount of fingerprints as possible. Then we're gonna put 4 more layers. That's 4, but it's kind of small. That'd work. I'm gonna go on the bottom instead of the top. I don't want to mess up my top. And I usually pick it up from the side, not top and bottom, because I don't want it to break this way. Okay? I'll put 4 more layers on top of that, and then put this in a plastic bag till tomorrow.